Hey nerds, what's up? I think we're all extremely excited for the last installment in the Mistborn Era 2 series, but it has been a while since Bands of Mourning came out, and if you haven't reread the books, it might be hard to remember all the details you need to know. So I am hoping this video will help jog your memory on all those important details. I have partnered up with Lore of the Worlds to bring you this really quick and succinct overview to jog your memory. We are going to use chapters in this video so that you can jump around to what you need to remember most. We're going to start off with a character review with details about all the characters and what we know about them so far. Then I'm going to jump into a very brief overview of each of the 3 books. Now, if you need something more detailed at the end of this video, I really recommend going to the 17 Shards Coppermind, where they have a chapter by chapter summary if there are some details you still haven't quite grasped. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Lore, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much for that intro, Bookborn. My name's Lore of the World. I'm going to be walking you through some of the characters as well as a few unanswered questions. First character, let's talk about Waxilium Ladrian. Wax is a twin-born crasher, meaning he can elementically burn steel to, push against metal and things, and ferrochemically he can store his weight for later use, making himself very heavy. Wax first grew up in Elendel, first living with his parents in the city proper, and then his grandmother inside of the terrace village within the city. Once he came of age, Wax left to live in the Roughs, where he married Lessie. Yeah, we're gonna talk about her. And then eventually, after Lessie's death, he moved back to the city. Wax is currently married to Steris Harms, and just as like a mental image, when you think of Wax, picture like Clint Eastwood from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and then put him in a nice cravat, and you pretty much got Wax. Okay, Wayne. Wayne is Wax's deputy and happens to be a twin-born much like Wax. Wayne is a slider, meaning he can burn Bendalloy to form like a time bubble around himself, and a blood maker, meaning he can ferrochemically store health to draw upon later. He first met Wax out in the Roughs and eventually followed Wax back to Elendel, but due to his past, he fears guns and uses some super sweet dueling cane action instead. Is great. Just to give you a mental image, when you think of
Wayne,
picture Clint Eastwood's character from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, except he's played by Chris Pratt. Marcy. Marcy Colmes is the illegitimate half-sister of Steris Colmes. She's studying law when we meet her, but by the start of the second book, she's already managed to land a pretty sweet gig in Elendel's constabulary. Marcy's a pulsar, meaning she can burn cadmium to form a time bubble around herself, but it's the opposite power of Wayne's. So basically, where Wayne is slowing down time outside of the bubble and speeding it up inside, she's slowing down time inside of her bubble and speeding it up outside. Super interesting power that we're probably gonna see a little bit more of soon, but I'm getting a little bit off track here. Okay. Steris. Steris is the half-sister of Marcy and the current wife of Waxilium Ladrian. Though she was originally betrothed to Wax for purely political reasons, they actually ended up falling for each other after, a few books worth of content. Steris loves order, and she's overprepared for, pretty much every situation. While she doesn't have any allomantic or ferrochemical ability, it should be noted that she's super dope anyways. Milan. Milan is a Khandra of the 7th generation. Though she was born before the Cassandra, she is still pretty much a child by Khandra standards. I mean, the oldest ones are 1,300 years old? Throughout the series, she becomes more and more involved with our main crew, helping them solve crimes and just generally being awesome. She also happens to currently be dating Wayne. Edwarn Ladrian. Also known as Mr. Suit, Edwarn is Wax's uncle. He's the primary villain for Era 2, at least the first 3 books. At one point, he was believed to be the leader of a Set, a secret organization that wants to overthrow Elendel's government, etc., bad things, you know the deal. During Bands of Mourning, it is discovered that Edwarn actually reports to Wax's sister Telsin, also known as Sequence, and he's actually killed at the end of Bands of Mourning, though it is, kind of hinted that he may still be kicking around somewhere in the cognitive realm. His death did seem a little bit sudden. We'll see what happens. Okay, Telsin. Telsin Ladrian, also known as the Sister of Wax, also known as Lady Sequence, also known as a Total Tool. Essentially, Telsin's a high-ranking member of the set. Her death was faked at one point, and she was discovered alive, made it look like it happened by Ed Warren. It was this whole thing. But basically, she faked her death, she's alive again, and she's like really high up in the set. Telsin uses Hemalurgy to be not only a coin shot, but also a blood maker and leecher, which gives her a lot of different abilities, somehow all outside of the control of Harmony. We don't really know how that's working, but we will probably find out in the next book. And it should be noted that though her spikes were removed at the end of Bands of Mourning, she is on the run and could theoretically find more. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Lessie. So Lessie was Wax's first wife from Out in the Roughs. Much later after her death, it is learned that Lessie was actually a Khandra sent by Harmony to protect Wax, and her real name is Paalm. Paalm is a Khandra of the 3rd generation. After Lessie's death, she removed a spike to no longer be under Harmony's influence. Henceforth, she became known as Bleeder. Ultimately, she chose to remove her spikes herself, choosing to die free of Harmony's influence rather than live under his yoke, constantly listening to whatever he told her to do. One interesting note is that her spikes were made from Trellium, a mysterious metal currently attributed to the shard known as Trell. We're going to be talking about Trell just a little bit later in the video, don't you worry. Next up, Renette. Renette is a gunsmith who makes very interesting guns specifically aimed at harming those with allomantic or ferrochemical powers. She's absolutely brilliant, but super duper reclusive, choosing to live in relative obscurity in Elendel, designing new guns, ammo, and various other gadgets. She's super cool. I love Renette. Miles Daguerre. Also known as Miles 100 Lives, Miles was a former lawman turned criminal. He actually used to work with Wax back in the day. He ended up leading the Vanishers though, which is an underground organization working with the set to acquire funds and steal allomancers, like literally steal whole people. He's not the best guy. Miles is a twin-born augur, which is a particularly powerful combination of gold allomancy and gold feruchemy. And what makes Miles so very powerful is his ability to compound, which essentially means he's using his allomantic gold burning ability to power his gold feruchemical ability. It's a little bit confusing, but essentially he's using one to power the other, and this essentially gives him near unlimited health. Unless his gold bracers are taken away, of course, which they are at the end of Alloy of Law, and he's executed. In theory, we won't be hearing from Miles again, but you never know. And lastly, we have Harmony. Harmony is the combined shard of Ruin and Preservation, the two shards from Era 1. Harmony's vessel is currently Sazed, who is one of the absolute coolest characters from Era 1, right? He is essentially God for the planet of Scadrial, but he's slowly losing control of the planet as Trell, who's a foreign shard, moves in to take a little bit of that territory, a little bit of Harmony's turf. We'll really see how this plays out in the next book, I think, but Era 3 is going to be mostly focused on the Trell-Harmony battle. Oh god, I'm so excited for that. Okay, Bookborn, I'm going to throw it back to you for now, and I'll be back in just a little bit. See you then.
Let's start with our review of the Alloy of Law. We start with Wax in the Roughs, who has teamed up with Lessie to hunt an outlaw named Bloody Tan. At the end of this confrontation, Bloody Tan has captured Lessie, and Wax tries to shoot Bloody Tan, but accidentally ends up shooting Lessie instead. He then kills Bloody Tan. This, along with the death of Wax's uncle, is one of the inciting factors that brings Wax back into the city to take over House Ladrian. Here, he attempts to put away and stop his lawman life. Part of this involves an agreement to marry into House Harms through essentially a contract. Wax would marry Steris, Harm's daughter, in order to bring House Harm notoriety and House Ladrian money. We also find out that Wayne, Wax's partner, has followed him to the city. Here is where he also meets Steris' half-sister, Marcy. Wax continues to struggle to avoid his old habits as a lawman and becomes very interested in a group known as the Vanishers. And at a party, the Vanishers attack, and Wax's suspicions are confirmed that the thefts are just a way to cover up kidnappings. Steris is kidnapped and they attempt to kidnap Marcy, but she escapes. Wayne, Wax, and Marcy then team up to try and rescue Steris, and during this process, they discover that it seems that the Vanishers are stealing Allomancers in order to breed Allomancers. There's also the mystery of how the Vanishers have been stealing aluminum off of train cars without anyone knowing how. Through further investigation, they think the Vanishers are linked to Miles Dagator, or Miles 100 Lives, who used to be a rough slawman like Wax. Through Miles' point of view, we are also introduced to a character called Mr. Suit, and Mr. Suit is a head of a group called the Set, who are working with the Vanishers. Trying to get to the heart of the matter, Wax hides in one of the shipments of aluminum, hoping that he will be there when it is vanished, and it ends up working and he is taken back to their hideout. A confrontation then ensues between Wax, Miles 100 Lives, and then eventually Wayne and Marcy. Steris is rescued, and Marcy ends up playing an integral role in keeping Miles distracted while burning cadmium, a skill she had previously thought was useless. A few important notes you might have forgotten: Marcy initially starts this book with a slight obsession and crush on Wax because she was obsessed with his lawman days. At the end of the book, though, she gives up on this, and Steris and Wax decide to go through with their engagement. Wax has also been talking to Harmony during this book using his earring, which is an important thing for later novels. At the end, Harmony does end up talking back once in this book, saying that Wax was the person he sent to deal with the Vanishers. In the epilogue, we witness Miles 100 Lives finally dying by execution. Marcy also meets Iron Eyes, or Marsh, and he gives her a book to give to Wax. And Wax discovers that Mr. Set is his not dead uncle Edwarn. Let's move on to Shadows of Self. We start this novel with a flashback to when Wax met Lessie, and if you don't remember, Wax and Lessie were romantically involved. As we jump to the present, Wax has now become a special constable, and Marcy is working as an assistant to the Captain General. They hunt a Robin Hood type figure named the Marksman, but he is assassinated before they can capture him. Wax sees the face of Bloody Tan in the crowd while he is chasing the Marksman, and it really unsettles him. Afterwards, they are called to investigate the death of the governor's brother in very suspicious circumstances. He was hosting a party, and him and all of his guests were killed. It looks like the party was criminal activity, and Wax determines that the killer must have been a chemist and known to the governor's brother based on the evidence and how things are laid out. The city of Ellendale is in a state of unrest. Wax goes to visit his grandmother in the terrace village to ask about steel runners, or someone who can gain speed. He is told to look up Adashwi, but when Wax and Wayne investigate her, she is found dead. With the help of Iron Eye's book on hemalurgy, they suspect that someone is stealing powers. Meanwhile, Marcy is really concerned that the governor might be corrupt, and while listening to a tone-deaf speech he is given, she is able to stop an assassination attempt on his life. Harmony then asks Wax directly to help him stop a Khandra named Bleeder that has gone rogue. She is also known as Palm. She is stealing powers, but only using one spike at a time so that she cannot be controlled by Harmony. While at a party, Bleeder finds a way to talk to Wax through his earring. Wax attempts to chase Bleeder down, but is instead ambushed. He thinks Bleeder and the Set may be working together. He also meets the Khandra Milan, who Harmony has sent to help Wax. More unrest is being sowed throughout the city, presumably by Bleeder. This ends up culminating to an experience where Bleeder impersonates a Pathian priest while murdering a survivorist priest. She also makes another attempt on the governor's life. Following clues, Wax decides to go to the Khandra homeland in pursuit of Palm. He has another confrontation with his uncle, who says that he should be viewed as Kelsier and his crew, and that they should have supported the Lord Ruler. Wax promises that he is going to take down his uncle after he deals with Bleeder. Marcy finds hard evidence of the governor's corruption, while Wax ends up meeting Tensoon. They are attacked by hemalurgic constructions. Once defeated, Wax feels like this was all a distraction and hurries back to the governor, worried that Bleeder has gotten to him. However, Wayne has already discovered something, and Wax later discovers this and figures it out, but they find that Bleeder has already actually taken over the governor's body. They have a confrontation, and Wax chases her. Marcy and Wayne, meanwhile, convince Milan to re-impersonate the governor as well and deliver a speech to try to help the unrest. This doesn't go well, partly due to the rioters and soothers working for the Set in the crowd, and the speech ends with the Captain General arresting the fake governor. Meanwhile, Wax ends up cornering Bleeder and shooting her with another spike so that Harmony can control her. Bleeder instead chooses to destroy herself rather than be controlled by Harmony. During her death, Wax realizes that Bleeder is actually Lessie, and she had been sent by Harmony to be his bodyguard in the roughs. Wax hates Harmony for making him kill Lessie again. In the prologue, we see Wax absolutely despondent and emotionally wrecked by the events that have happened, but we also see Steris trying to emotionally support him. The Captain General Aradel has been made governor. They've also recovered a strange spike from Bleeder, and they don't know what metal it is made out of. They think it may be linked to Trell. And finally, the longest book of them all, the Bands of Mourning. We start with a flashback of when Wax lived in the Terrace village. There was some crime and his aunt didn't want to bring justice to the village. After a confrontation with another villager where he ends up dead, Wax decides the Terrace village isn't for him. We also see Wax and Lessie's wedding. Back in the present, we are at Wax and Steris's wedding day. The wedding is interrupted by an accident, which we later find out was Wayne's doing to postpone the wedding. Wax denies a Kandra named Vendel who comes and asks him for help because he is still mad at Harmony, and so the Kandra Vendel goes and asks Marcy for help instead. Some really important conversations about identity and investiture happen in these few chapters, and so if you don't remember any of that, I would recommend going and looking up what those are, because I do think they will come into play later if you care about the magic system. Essentially, they talk about how you could perhaps store identity to make oneself a blank slate to use another person's metal mind, or how you could perhaps store identity and somehow make an unkeyed metal mind that anyone could use. Then they discuss the Bands of Mourning, an item that supposedly grants the Lord Ruler's power to anyone, and they assume they must have been his bracers. Wax is still refusing to help Vendel when he's giving this presentation until he sees a picture of his sister alive and with the set. He presumes that his uncle has kept his sister alive and kidnapped this entire time. Marcy also agrees to help Vendel with a missing spike in a Kandra that, if they recover, may help them find out what's going on with the Bands of Mourning and some other strange events that are happening. And so our crew all together heads to New Saran. Of course, a train robbery ensues. Wax wants to go after the gang, but Marcy reminds him of his real task. Marcy also recovers a strange cube device that deals with allomancy. Wax and Steris go to a party in New Saran to find out more. While there, they realize a strange coin Hoyd has given them means more than they thought. As he pursues this, he hears his uncle talking. Turns out it's just through a device. The set is talking about distracting Wax so that he doesn't go after the real target. Meanwhile, Marcy and Wayne are trying to recover the spike at several different locations and end up at a graveyard. They are attacked by the set and barely escape. Using trickery though, they end up finding out that the spike has been sent to a very small town called Dulcine. While traveling to Dulcine, Wax realizes he's accidentally recovered a huge gold metal mine that he gives to Wayne, and Wayne says it has huge amounts of power stored up. They think this may be proof that the Bands of Mourning could potentially exist, but also proof that Mr. Suit seems to be using Hemallurgy to give him or his followers powers. They also discover that the box Marcy recovered can be used to store allomantic powers and then be set off later, kind of like an allomantic bomb. They break into a set warehouse where they think the spike is, and inside they find this giant ship that they don't know what to make of. Marcy and Milan are able to recover the spike, and Wax and Wayne are able to rescue his sister. Marcy and Milan also find a strange masked man who was imprisoned inside the ship. With difficulty, they are able to escape attacks from the set. The strange masked man is named Alec. He helps them escape with his ship, which can fly with allomantic help. He explains how they have medallions that can be imbued with allomantic power and used by anyone. He also explains that someone they call the Sovereign taught them about this 10 years after Harmony ascended. Wax and Marcy assume the records are wrong and that this must have been the Lord Ruler. They then use the ship to follow the set up a mountain where they believe the Bands of Mourning are being stole to try to steal them before the set can recover them. They end up getting there first, and they go through a temple filled with traps, but Wax is realizing that it feels too expected and what should be there. They have another confrontation with the set, and that's when Wax realizes that his sister is actually the leader of the set, not his uncle. His sister Telsin then removes Milan's spike, making her back into a mist wraith. Wax also sees that Edwarn and Telsin have hemallurgic spikes. Wax is almost dead from his confrontation. The bands he finds don't work. He realizes they are yet another decoy. He then realizes what the real bands are, but dies before he can tell Wayne. Wax speaks with Harmony. Harmony helps him let go of some of his anger. Wax also sees a red mist threatening Scadrial. Harmony asks him if he wants to stay dead and go on, or go back. Wax decides to go back. Marcy has finally realized that the spearhead they found at the front of the building is the actual Bands of Mourning. She takes it up and feels like the Ascendant Warrior. She realizes all this power isn't what she wants, and she goes and gives it to Wax, which helps him heal and escape. Wax agrees to confront his uncle without the bands. Wayne, still thinking Wax is dead, is so angry he picks up a gun and goes to kill Telsin. He shoots her and gets Milan's spike back and goes and rescues Milan from becoming a mist wraith. Marcy and Steris find other members of a previous journey of Alec's people, the Malwish. Once the confrontation with the set is over and they have escaped for the most part, Wax and the leader of the Malwish have an argument about who gets to keep the Bands of Mourning. Finally, it is agreed that the Malwish will get to leave back to their homeland with the ship, the Kandra will take the Bands of Mourning, and trade will be opened between Eladel and the Malwish people. Wayne admits he knew that Telsin likely had healing and so wasn't actually worried about killing her permanently. Wax is a little disappointed because he wished that his sister would be gone and that they wouldn't have to deal with this anymore. He also asks Steris to marry him for love and not for contract. In the epilogue, we see Suit sitting in his cell where a strange man with red eyes comes to visit him, tells him he is no longer needed, and then sets off a device that destroys both him and Mr. Suit. At the end, we see that Wax realizes the coin Hoyd gave him is actually a metal mind and taps it to see a memory. In it, he sees someone saving the Malwish people. It's the survivor of Hathsin. I hope you made it through all that, and I hope it was helpful. I just reread all 3 books in preparation for The Lost Metal. Now, if you've been following me for a little bit, you know that Era 2 Mistborn isn't my favorite Sanderson, but I have to say, I like them quite a bit more on a reread, and I think it's just because my expectations were set. I wasn't expecting Era 1, I knew what Era 2 was, and I will say rereading the Bands of Mourning, which was the one that I liked the best of Era 2, renewed my excitement for The Lost Metal, especially since I have a feeling a lot of Cosmere things and potentially world hopping will happen in The Lost Metal. It makes me very excited. I'm gonna throw it back to Lore of the Worlds for some of the more important questions we have going into the 4th book.
Okay, let's go over some of the biggest unanswered questions that we have from Era 2 so far, right? Okay, question 1. Who is Trell? So this is kind of like the big question from Era 2 so far, right? And we're not really a whole lot closer to figuring out who it was than we were at the beginning of the series, or even like who's responsible for its creation, right? Though there are like a few possibilities of which shard could be manifesting this on Scadrial, it does seem most likely that Trell is some sort of an avatar of autonomy, although what its goals are is anyone's guess at this point. I think we're most likely gonna have an answer to this by the end of this book. But I can see Brando being sneaky and not answering until early Era 3. I hope that doesn't happen, but we'll see, I guess, right? Okay, question 2. Who is Harmony's sword? So one of the biggest looming threats to Scadrial is Harmony's inability to reconcile the 2 disparate shards that he holds, right? As a result of their competing intents, he is left completely unable to accomplish all but the most like really simple tasks, rendering him powerless to stop the many threats facing Scadrial. As a result, he's taken to looking for someone to act in his stead, a sort of sword, if you will, an extension of himself. Many people think that this character will be Wax, but I wouldn't be 100% positive on that. He has been burned by Harmony before in like a really big way, right? And I could see him turning down an offer to act as an extension of Harmony after all that he's been through. Honestly, I could see it being Wayne. I could see it being Marcy too, but I could really see it being Wax. Tough choice. I guess we'll have to find out. Question 3. Kelsier? What's Kelsier been up to is a gigantic question at this point. And frankly, I don't have any idea. I have none, but I don't think we're gonna be getting too much more info on Kelsier, at least not in this era. I'd love to. I would absolutely love to know exactly what Kelsier's been up to this whole time, but I feel like Brandon's gonna be holding back on that one, giving us the juicy deets like in Era 3 as opposed to Era 2. Prove me wrong, Brando. Give me all the Kelsier this book. We'll see. Okay. Question 4. What's Atium's deal? Unseen since Era 1, Atium has come to be known as the Lost Metal, colloquially on Scadrial. It's an extremely powerful god metal, able to grant its user the ability to see shadows of the future in an allomantic sense, and ferrochemically it allows a user to store age. When using compounding mechanics, obviously this breaks things a little bit, and kind of allows the user to stay alive infinitely young. It's wild. This is exactly how the Lord Ruler was staying alive for so long, and part of the reason he was mining so much Atium. So nowadays, only a really small amount of the metal is known to exist. It's currently in the possession of Marsh, who is in theory probably using it to keep himself alive, but we really don't know what's going on at this point. And it's unknown if it still grows, if Harmony is even able to produce it. We just don't know. But it is one of the biggest unanswered questions of Era 2, and I mean, look at the book title, we're probably going to be finding a little bit more about this by the end of Era 2, right? Okay, that about wraps up the biggest unanswered questions that I have for the day. And yeah, I think I'm going to throw it back over to you, Bookborn.
If you want to know more about Wax and what lore of the world and what I think may happen with him, our predictions for the next book, you can check out his video on Wax, which I will link here. Please let me know what you're most excited about for the final installment of Era 2. Let me know what you think about Era 2 versus Era 1, and hopefully this gave you a good refresher so that you are ready this November. I'll see you next time. Bye.